Hello and welcome. I'm Luminara Serdar, founder of Autism Transformed. And today what I want to talk about, let me plug in a little light here. Noticing I'm a little dark on the screen. Today what I want to talk about is yeast in autism. And what is yeast and what does this mean? What are signs that your child might have yeast overgrowth? So yeast, typically, the type of yeast overgrowth our kids have is Candida. So I'm going to be speaking specifically about that. And, first I want to say yeast is a normal part of our microbiome in our gut. So it's normal for us to have yeast. And it's also normal to have some quote unquote bad bacteria. I was just listening to a couple of practitioners I really respect talk about gut health and the gut microbiota. And what they were saying is that we might have these bad guys in there to just stimulate a little bit of reaction so that we keep the good guys going. It's called hormesis. It's where we stimulate a little bit of, it's like when you work out with your muscles. You work out with weights and you tear down the muscle a little bit so that stimulates more muscle to grow. That's hormesis. So these bad bacteria in our gut may be because we have hormesis and it's part of the whole balance. So yeast is a normal part of our gut microbiome. That's well known. And when we have yeast overgrowth, that can be problematic. Why? Because yeast, yeast can change form. There is a huge body of work in the research literature back in the early 1900s, mainly by a scientist named Leda Mattman, talking about pleomorphism. What that means is change in shape. So when yeast get too overgrown or there is a situation in the gut like heavy metals, high heavy metal load, the yeast will change shape and they go from a little round circle type organism to one that looks a little bit elongated and grows legs, which are called hyphae, and that can poke holes in the gut. So yeast are there to help us actually with our heavy metal burden, and they can change shape, poke holes in the gut, and create, be a part of the creation of leaky gut. So I just want to say it's normal to have yeast, and it sequesters heavy metals. Mainly, there's been some research on mercury, but other metals as well. Sequester means to hold it in. So if the yeast takes the metal in, the body doesn't have to deal with it. But what the body does have to deal with is all the changes that creates in the yeast, including spitting out their own toxins. And if we have an overgrowth of yeast, they are fermenting sugars. So you're probably familiar with fermentation, fermented products like kimchi and sauerkraut and yogurt. I used to work in a yeast genetics lab where we would ferment the yeast. I used to ferment bacteria. And what that means is you give them, this is how wine or beer is made, you give them a simple sugar and they turn it into alcohol. So this is partly why your child might have inappropriate laughter, because when yeast ferments our simple sugars that our kids crave, right? Pastas, bread, potatoes, rice, all those carbs, some that I'm familiar with, some kids on the spectrum, most kids are craving. It's because the yeast and the microbes in the gut are craving those, because they can use those simple sugars to proliferate, to grow, to make more of themselves. And what the yeast does is ferment that sugar and makes alcohol, ethanol. And that alcohol, it's kind of like giving your child a beer or some wine. The alcohol goes right to the brain. And what do we do when we're drunk? We're giddy, we laugh, it's fun, we relax. So this is what the yeast can be doing in the body. And so what are other signs that your child might have yeast? And you'll probably be familiar with these. Bedwetting can be one of them. I talked about inappropriate laughter at weird times. Definitely disturbed sleep. Bedwetting. Just being really tired because there's this whole process going on and the alcohol is a depressant. Fogginess, like their brain's not working. Think about if you've ever had alcohol to drink, how you might feel, just a little foggy and not remembering things. And then a child might get hyperactive if there's a yeast overgrowth. High-pitched squealing is related to this, so those really high-pitched sounds. Sensory seeking, defensiveness, so it could affect sensory issues. Definitely it affects what they eat, right? So they're going to self-limit and want to get those easy carbs. And of course, sugar craving, climbing and jumping off of things that can be yeast related. Some of these can be parasite related too, but know that these behaviors are very related to the microbiome, to the bugs in our gut, and then the toxins they create, and then it affects the brain. So all of these autism behaviors can be directly related back to overgrowth of certain microbes or parasites, and then affecting the brain. So your child might have GI symptoms, bloated tummy, discomfort, a lot of gas, hard time pooping, which is constipation. So if your child isn't pooping at least once a day and it looks like a smooth log, then that's constipation, and your child really needs to be pooping every day. I've seen that when I help parents to get their kids pooping every day, the behaviors go down. The anger, the anxiety, eye contact improves. So some even have new words coming on because the toxins are actually leaving the body through the feces. One sign might be a white tongue, so like thrush in the mouth, like rash in the mouth. You can get rash under the armpits, kind of the wet, moist parts of the body, armpits, inner elbows, back of the knees, or, really anywhere. The yeasty rash is kind of red and moist. Of course, eczema can be related to this, and also liver problems. So we don't always know what the exact cause is, and it could be a combination of causes that, have your child have eczema and rashes. And then there can be cracking around the toes and joints. Some kids have fungus, foot fungus, nail fungus. So these are some signs that, and also, maybe your child seems to regress in skills or speech or abilities or movement or something they were able to do before and then they're not, is a sign of yeast overgrowth. And what I see that most physicians want to do is prescribe nystatin or prescribe an antifungal. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I've seen is that kids are on nystatin for a week, for weeks, for months, and then when they go off of it, the yeast blooms again because it's keeping the yeast quiet when they are on the nystatin, or even an herbal antifungal. But then when they go off it, it blooms again. Why? Because there's toxic metals and other things. There's food for them, and so they're going to flourish again. I also suspect that the yeast, as well as other bacteria, mold, and Lyme, can hide inside parasites. And so you bring out the nystatin and the yeast goes, ooh, let me go inside that parasite and hide out. And when the nystatin's gone, it's like they're checking, is the coast clear? All right, we can go out again. So, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it is, I'm giving a metaphor, but that can definitely be happening. And definitely, excess sugar, excess carbohydrates can cause yeast overgrowth, or it can be a sign, which comes first, the chicken or the egg. It can cause the yeast overgrowth, or it can be a sign that the yeast are overgrowing to crave those carbs. And definitely use of antibiotics. I know so many kids who have recurrent ear infections. Is that your child? The more we use antibiotics, the more we're killing the bacteria in our gut. And when we diminish the bacteria population, that gives the yeast a chance to flourish. So that's part of it. And then, just the immune system being out of whack, which can be because of so many things, and then it's not going after the yeast. So that can be one of the reasons we have a yeast infection. And these are all kind of intertwined and a part of the whole. I wouldn't say it's any one thing. So we have to look at the whole system, the whole body, and what is really going on in the body. And then if your child's ever been on steroids, and that could be because they have eczema, that can help the yeast flourish as well. So, it's kind of hard to get rid of. I think one of the things we need to think about is what's underlying, and we need to, first of all, have all our systems of drainage open. We need to be pooping every day, and then we need to support the liver. And then we need to help go after the heavy metals. And there are different ways to go after heavy metals. But as we bring that load down, the system is less sensitive. Yeast is not as much out of control. So then if we do use something like nystatin or herbs like biocidin, which are really great for yeast, then that really does bring the population down. Another piece of that puzzle is to help eliminate the parasites that store the yeast, so that when we go off the nystatin or the biocidin, the population is down. And of course, to not feed your child simple sugars. Of course, we need carbohydrates, but we don't need chicken nuggets every day, or French fries, or potatoes, or rice. Really good pasture-raised organic meat can be so helpful and kind of curing for the body, for the gut microbiome. I was just listening to this podcast where it was recommended for people to go on a carnivore diet for 1 to 3 months, and it just totally resets the gut. It resets the colon, the lower bowel. And so you're not feeding any, simple sugars for the bugs, and it just helps eliminate these things if your child's going to eat that. But that would be something you might want to try, is good fats and, more carnivore diet. And what have you got to lose to try that, right? And I have a client who put his daughter on this, and she's actually, when she doesn't, she used to just eat all her food and want more, which was good food, really healthy. And when now she can be eating her dinner and be like, I'm done, I'm full, and there's still some left on the plate. And that's a first. That's never happened before. So I think and she's pooping great. So I think the gut microbiome there's something that happens with a carnivore diet. And again, you need to have really clean sources of food. If you eat conventional chicken, there's tons of arsenic in that, and that's something that might flourish the yeast again because of the arsenic. I've seen so many kids who have really high levels of arsenic, and I was just at a conference, the Documenting Hope Adventures in Healing conference in Orlando, which was awesome. And there was a doctor there speaking about how loaded chicken is with arsenic. So if we're giving our kids chicken nuggets that are, conventionally raised, I don't even know about organic, maybe there's arsenic in it, he didn't differentiate, then we're giving them more and more arsenic every time. So diet is the best way to help with yeast. There's also like the GAPS diet and the specific carbohydrate diet that won't feed the yeast. They're carbohydrates that aren't the simple sugars, and they're just mostly good vegetables. So you can look that up online. What is the specific carbohydrate diet? What is the GAPS diet? GAPS. And you can Google that with Natasha Campbell McBride. She's the one who does that diet. And, part of that diet is a lot of eggs every day. And the egg yolks actually contain cholesterol and really good fat that help build the brain and help fix the gut. So diet is the first thing. Bone broths are really great too, from organically grown, naturally pasture-raised meats. I love lamb bone broth. That is so rich and so satisfying. Chicken bone broth, beef bone broth. I have a friend who just told me the other day she makes a combination. They save their bones of beef, pork, and chicken and make a combo bone broth. So isn't that cool? Anyway, we can also help with probiotics, and there's a yeast probiotic that's called Saccharomyces boulardii, and that competes with the Candida. So I have seen people take Saccharomyces boulardii as a supplement and really reduce the sugar cravings, because it's really helping to control the Candida yeast. So that's something that can also be used to help control Candida. And certain herbs, but you want to work with a practitioner. I mentioned biocidin, oregano, grapefruit seed extract, but you don't want to just go randomly killing these things. You want to have binders involved, and then there's some enzymes that will help break down the yeast. So Enzymedica has a candidase, there's Candex. So these are enzymes that help break down different components of the yeast, but you still want to use binders with these, because when those cells break open, they're going to release toxins and heavy metals, whatever's inside them. Of course, there's certain, making sure your child has enough micronutrients, which are vitamins and minerals, is super helpful. Biotin is one, that's a B vitamin, niacinamide, and selenium, which is a metal that we need to do some enzymatic reactions. So those are really great for yeast. Again, you don't know what your child needs, so I would talk to a qualified practitioner or learn muscle testing so you can see if that's going to be good with their diet, with their body. And they might need biotin but might not need selenium, or they might need one thing and not others, or they might need the whole combo, or they might need more than that to help with eliminating yeast. And it's really getting their body systems back online so that they can naturally deal with the yeast on their own. So that's the idea behind the micronutrients. It gives a boost to their immune system. And then, of course, anything to support the immune system, especially in the season where we have winter, vitamin D, D3, vitamin K2, zinc, it really helps. Magnesium helps. Vitamin A can help. And sometimes what I use with my clients is immunoglobulins. So they're immunoglobulins that are specific for the gut. And what they do is they have a dialogue with our own immune system cells in the body and with the microbes, and it just helps quiet inflammation, and it helps to, bring down the bad microbe population and increase the good microbes. And I like, there's one that's a practitioner only, it's SBI Protect, and then there's Megaspore Microbiome Labs that has Mega IgG. I use that a lot with my clients, but there's other ones as well, and you may be able to get those. Again, I would work with a practitioner, and someone says, can you keep recording? I am recording. So you can work with a practitioner to find out, look at the whole picture of what your child actually needs. And we start by what's going on in the body. What are the biggest toxins? What's the biggest burden in the body? Where is that burden? And then what do we do to help eliminate that burden or reduce the burden and support the immune system? Licorice can be a really great thing for helping with hormonal balance, and it's DGL licorice. And I know a lot of people that have used camel's milk, and that is filled with those little IgGs, the little immunoglobulins that cross the blood-brain barrier, but also stay in the gut. Colostrum can be a really great thing too, right? That's what's in our breast milk. And immunoglobulins and colostrum are in our breast milk, and that can really help the microbiome. So some of these strategies are not just about yeast, but helping the whole microbiome. And I've seen a gluten-free, casein-free diet. I know that's hard. So it's gluten, wheat, and dairy-free. Gluten is in other things like rye and barley, and sometimes it's put in oats, so you want to get gluten-free. And then And then, trying not to use antibiotics. I know that's hard, but if it's a viral infection, you definitely don't need antibiotics. Most things clear up on their own. It's just we're so concerned about our kids, which is normal, and we want to go to the doctor and do something, and I think antibiotics are so overprescribed. So sometimes there's a compound called oxalate that's in foods like spinach and almonds and kale are high in oxalates. And it forms a little crystal in the body, and which it kind of pokes at tissues. And if we have high oxalates, if we have high oxalate in the diet, or our body is imbalanced in that, it doesn't feel good. And if we go on a low oxalate diet and we dump oxalates, that doesn't feel good too. So magnesium citrate can help with that, vitamin B6 and biotin. And so it's these little crystals get in the joints and cause pain. They can get in the kidney. So this is what causes kidney stones. So we want to make sure we're looking at oxalates, and there's a whole website, I think it's called Oxalate Free. So you can look up information if you think your child is sensitive to oxalates. And again, working with a good nutritionist, I would say probably most pediatricians don't know about these special diets, but a good nutritionist, especially one who's worked with autism, will know about these. And like I said, you definitely, when we're doing any of these treatments or any of these modifications, we want to always be on binders. Chlorella is a great one to bind heavy metals, and activated charcoal is a broad binder. I love to use one called biotoxin binder, and you can only get it through a practitioner account because the company doesn't want to work with end consumers. They want to work with practitioners and have practitioners guide customers. I think I actually have a couple of bottles of biotoxin binder left that I'm willing to part with just through me, and you don't have to work with me to do those. And then how do you find out if your child has yeast? Well, some of the symptoms that I mentioned, but you can do stool tests, and they come up in a stool test. I like to use a company that will, see what the different strains are. And the advantage of that is you're not only looking for yeast, you're looking for all the other good bacteria and bad bacteria. So you want to find a good test like that. I recently started working with a company called Tiny Health, and they came into business because the mom who started the company wanted to test her baby's gut microbiome. One of her first child was born through cesarean, and her second one was a vaginal birth, and they had very different microbiomes in their gut. So this Tiny Health gives you a baseline for your child. They don't just do babies. They started by doing babies, but they do children and adults. So I just did a test, and I'm waiting for my results to come back. And then a lot of people do other tests, and there's all kinds of tests. I love to do toxin testing, which tells me what's the level of heavy metals, which is one of the reasons yeast is there, and what are the industrial and environmental toxins, and what are mold toxins. Mold toxins can also be a contributor and cause these symptoms that yeast cause, or contribute to those symptoms. And we really want to find out if your child is exposed to mold, if there's mold in your home. It can really shut down the body in certain ways. Frequent urination, bedwetting can be a sign. Brain fogginess can be a sign of mold, and mold yeast are close. Mold yeast fungus are a little bit connected, but you want to check your home for mold. I have a client who just checked, and she had it in several places. It's going to cost a lot to remediate, but she's having issues, and her son is having issues, and allergies can be a part of that. So, really check your home for mold. Check in the bathroom windows, check around the sinks and toilets, check where there might have been a water leakage even before you moved in, maybe. Check the ceilings, check the basement, check the attic. I had a client who they heard rats in their attic, and they had an exterminator come out to take a look. And the reason the rats were drawn to the house is because there was fungus all on the roof of the attic on the inside of the house. And her son was had huge symptoms, and I'm like, are you sure you don't have mold? So this fungus and mold can be really detrimental to our kids' bodies who are already full of toxins and have a hard time detoxifying. So again, if your child is laughing uncontrollably or inappropriately, weird times, it can be a sign they're drunk, that there's alcohol in the brain, creating fogginess, creating all kinds of brain symptoms, creating the symptoms we know of as autism, creating GI symptoms, like bloating and gas and constipation and wanting to rub the belly against a couch or an arm or a body so they can relieve the discomfort. These can be signs of yeast, and you want to get that taken care of, but underneath the yeast you want to get the toxins that are promoting the yeast overgrowth taken care of, and that would be mostly heavy metals. It could be radiation. I've seen kids with high arsenic. I've seen kids with high uranium. I've seen kids with high tin levels, and cadmium, mercury certainly. Grabbing privates is a sign of yeast overgrowth. It can be a sign of a lot of things. So the signs that I talked about can be from yeast, but they can be from other things, and it can be a multifactorial thing, not just one thing. I have seen kids, or parents have told me they will grab their private parts, or they have priapism, which means, this is for boys, which means the penis is hard and shouldn't be, right? It's hard inappropriately. It's not like they're aroused or anything. It's just they have a hard penis, little kids, 3, 4 years old. And to me, that's a sign of definitely dysfunction. It could be heavy metals, it could be yeast, it could be a lot of things, and it could be parasite contributor, but it's almost always toxins from microbes or toxins that feed the microbes. So yeah, there you go. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to post this as a reel so you guys can come back and listen. Appreciate your being here and your questions, and I will see you next week at the same time, Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Everyone have a great week.